If your voluminous gowns always look flat, it's not because they are complicated, it's because you're missing this shading technique. In this video, I'll show you the exact shading logic that gives voluminous gowns structure and depth so they stop looking flat. I create Procreate tutorials for beginner fashion illustrators, and one thing I always come back to is this. Shading gets much easier once you understand why each shadow is there. When I was learning shading, I used to place shadows based on what felt right. I'd add some under the burst, some along the sides, maybe a few on the skirt. But even with all that, the dress still didn't look clear or dimensional, it just felt messy. Because I was only thinking about where to darken the dress, I wasn't thinking about the structure of the dress. And by structure, I mean the actual 3D form of the dress. Which parts are raised above others, which parts turn away from the light, and which parts block light from reaching nearby areas. Shadows don't just follow light, they also follow structure. So let me show you what I mean. For this dress, I'm using top front lighting. So the upper burst area catches the light and the area underneath the burst falls into shadow. I also add shadows along the outline of the bodice and along the sides because those areas turn away from the light. Now look at the neckband. That part sits in shadows because the model's head and hair are casting shadow onto it. Same with the waistband. It doesn't lie completely flat against the body. It sits slightly on top of the bodice, so it creates a cast shadow underneath. And since the body curves backward at the sides of the waistband fall into shadow too. So I stopped asking where should I put the shadow and started asking what's facing the light, what's turning away from it, and what's casting the shadow onto something else. That's what makes the shading feel intentional. Now let's move to the skirt. Since this is a voluminous gown, I'm using the hill and valley method again. The raised sections are the hills, and the areas behind them are the valleys. We are using top front lighting, so the hills catch more highlights, and the valleys stay darker. Now notice the shape of the gown. It extends outward as it goes down, which means there's more volume near the floor than at the waist. So all that extra fabric is being drawn into the waist area, and that's why gathers form around the waist. Also look at the inner side of the skirt. That area is completely dark because the outer part of the gown covers it, so the light can really reach inside. Actually, the legs would fall into shadow too, but here I'm mainly focusing on the outfit. Now let's focus on the waist where the fabric is gathered. To show gathers, I didn't shade this as one flat area. Instead, I used alternating highlights and shadows. Now I'm going to hide the pattern layer so you can see it clearly. Here's a highlight, and shadow comes, and highlight, shadow, then highlight. That alternating pattern is what creates a look of gathered fabric. So the gathers don't come from randomly adding lines or shadows, they come from showing how the fabric bunches and compresses into the waist. This technique works because every shadow has a reason. Some shadows appear because the surface turns away from the light, some appear because one part of the dress casts shadow onto another, and some come from the way the fabric is gathered and shaped. So once you start shading with those reasons in mind, the gown begins to look dimensional much more naturally. If you want to get better at this, start with the basics of shading first. Because the same logic I use here, light direction, cast shadows, and fabric form, comes straight from foundational shading. I've also got a step-by-step video on screen, so go watch that next.